I can hear you fine. Yes. So I think we lost Andre. For a moment there, I
Yeah.
thought we lost me.
So I will continue. I will present Ken Sandy. He's a former VP product at Masterclass, and he's going to speak about product management in times like COVID-19. And he's a writer, speaker, and consultant. He actually has a blog where you can buy his book, The Influential Product Manager, and read more about what he does. He's one of the speakers at this year's conference. So welcome, Ken. You can share your screen and start your presentation. We are hearing you.
Excellent. Excellent. Can you see it?
Yeah, we can.
Great. Well, Gib's always a hard act to follow, I tell you. I've known him for quite some time. He's a great, great guy. So I hope you really enjoyed that. I'm going to take a little bit of a different tack today. I'm going to talk about like product management in the time of COVID, and what I mean to do is just sort of get us a little bit of perspective and reflection today. Really looking at kind of how our roles will possibly evolve or change in the next period of time, but just sort of also anchor us back on some of those really important things that product managers do well. So as I said, as is introduced, I've recently released a book. I'll give you a link at the end to get a discount version if you're interested. A lot of this material is sort of really anchored in what it takes to be an influential product manager. So a little bit more about me. I've been teaching product management at UC Berkeley for 8 years. I'm a practitioner, VP of product at a number of different companies. I've worked in consumer enterprise. I've worked in startups, larger companies. And really for me, a lot of my career has been about pattern matching and seeing different types of product management practices in all different types of environments. So one of the things that I really want to drive home and start off with is that at this point in time, empathy matters more than ever. I think we've really realized that our common weakness, if you like, our common enemy right now is coronavirus, yet it's shown us how really truly connected we are. Our response has actually been nothing short of miraculous. We're marshalling incredible resources across the world to respond and mitigate its efforts. It's unprecedented that whole societies, by some accounts, a third of the world, practicing social distancing, sheltering in place, in isolation, and really taking care of each other. While much of this was maybe mandated by governments, and each culture and society had maybe different responses, and there may have been some exceptions to the rule, for me this has really shown me how much we care for each other to make such sacrifices and how truly connected we are. We're continuing to find ways to connect to each other, even with when we're in lockdown. This is some neighbors having a conversation about their cats. We're connecting to each other in the workplace. We've had a unique look inside of the homes and lives of even our crustiest team members. We've seen our managers mishandle technology. We've created new memes. We've got a manager here that turned herself into a potato and couldn't figure out how to turn herself off. We've seen, as I'm sure you have, cats jump in the middle of important meetings, and children are always persistent in the background. And this is amazing to sort of see into people's lives at this point in time. We've also found ways to have fun. We've been able to have fun memes. We've been able to turn ourselves into all sorts of characters. We've got the Brady Bunch going on there. And we've even found ways in the times where we can't travel to still travel. And of course, we're having a chance to still celebrate. Who doesn't love a good happy hour now and then? And there's me right in the middle with my Corona beer, bit of tongue in cheek. I had a one-on-one meeting with a colleague of mine recently, and what really struck me was something that he said, so much so I had to write it down. He said that this is the first time in my life that I can call anyone anywhere, anytime in the world, and everyone is feeling the same. There's that same sense of isolation, fears, frustration. We don't even have to speak about it. There's an instant recognition and understanding. This is what empathy feels like. Not that we're literally necessarily going through the same things, but that we can connect and comprehend. And I'd really challenge every product manager to remember this feeling now, because that's how you want to feel with your customers every day when you're practicing product management, how you feel about your teams. Remember that feeling, because it will be something that you want to replicate after COVID is gone. Now, of course, not every company is operating with great empathy. And when it comes to operating with customers, now more than ever, it's time to operate from a deeply principled place. This is one of those make or break moments where how we treat our customers, and our colleagues for that matter, will potentially destroy the company or our product's reputation, or conversely, how we treat people might build loyalty for life. It just takes one careless action or negative customer response or ill thought through policy or an obviously self-serving initiative to destroy all that goodwill you've built up over your entire relationship. So you have to be very, very careful right now. This is actually an example of a travel center in Australia that had a travel policy, a cancellation policy that appeared to actually exceed the price of the tickets in the first place. This was all over the newspaper, and it basically forced the company later to cap its fees after a massive backlash. But the damage was already done. Needless to say, well, they actually made a mistake, but it was all too late. The Age here reported the numbers the wrong way around. They were actually canceling. The cancel fee was $1,500 for $2,200 in tickets, but it didn't really matter by then. So really, how you show through action, not talk, is going to be super important. Being generous and responsive in these extraordinary times is just essential. A lot of what Gib talked about in terms of culture, this is when you've got to make those kind of decisions around being able to let your culture show through and be ideally as generous and responsive to your customers as possible. But also remember one important thing, that you're going to serve nobody if you go out of business. And so making really hard choices at this point is going to be very important. So what should you do? What should your business do? What should you do? And what will your role as a product manager be in helping guide your company at this point? Well, deer in the headlights, you can freeze. It doesn't sound so good. Trying to pretend that it's business as usual, not making too much changes, probably not going to work out so well. You can flight. There's nothing wrong with that. This is about understanding the risks, refocusing, acting decisively, cutting back, kind of trying to live to fight another day. It's perfectly fine. Or you can fight directly. You can find opportunities and invest. You can kind of lean into the situation that we have and figure out how to make your product, your solution better and better for the market and these times. I would break down your potential response into 3 areas. The first is you've got to look after yourself. Understand your sphere of control and influence and operate calmly and thoughtfully within these. You do nobody any service if you kind of lose your head at this point. Determine how the changing landscape poses new or accelerated risks and adapt to those. And then finally, do not assume that we're going back to normal, whatever that really meant anyway. But think now about what opportunities the crisis presents to us, both internally in your company and externally in the market. It might be easy to overlook these because we're so focused on dealing with the crisis right now. But maybe there's an opportunity to position yourself to take advantage so you come out stronger as a company and as a team. So looking after yourself, this is a simple model of thinking about what you've got in your control, your sphere of control, your sphere of interest, influence, and everything else. So in your sphere of control, you have what you think, what you think, how you act, and what you say. That's all. Importantly, your attitude and your perspective right now is going to be super critical. Try to come to work with passion and unbending optimization. Have perspective. Each generation before us faced its own challenges, whether it was World War I, the Great Depression, World War II, and so forth. We've made, keeping perspective, we've made actually enormous advances in the last century and beyond, largely driven by new technologies, discoveries in science and healthcare. We're healthier, we live longer, we've by and large got higher standards of living, we're generally better educated, and we connect with other cultures, other people much more fluidly, both physically and virtually. And more people are out of poverty every day. This does not reduce the enormity of what we're going through right now, but it hopefully does put it in context. Secondly, make sure you're maintaining your rituals and your daily habits. Take your coffee in the morning, enjoy that shorter than normal commute, exercise, sleep well, eat well. And in the context of your work, keep up those habits that have made you successful. Read up on the trends, look at your dashboards, prepare for your team meetings, do your strategic planning, talk to customers. Be very deliberate. These deliberate, consistent actions can create a mountain of success. And have grit and resilience. Keep at it, show up to work every day, really persist. In the sphere of influence, you have things like the priorities that your company and your product focus on. You can influence your customers and you can influence your team. So at this time, it's super important to really tighten that focus. Go back to first principles. What is our vision? Especially in a crisis, the North Star of your company should really guide you. Start making tough choices earlier. Drive for focus in your organization. Try to influence people to make hard choices. And if you don't think what you're working on matters right now or post-COVID, then did it really ever? So maintaining focus is super critical. With customers, operate with heightened empathy. They're all going through a lot of their own challenges right now as well. Come from their point of view. What are the problems? What are the jobs to be done? How are my customers changing the way they work and live, and be there for them? More than ever, now we are the innovators, the problem solvers that our customers need. And finally, on team, really pay attention to building trust and building relationships with colleagues, particularly given that we need to compensate for what's been lost. That water cooler, being present all the time, the accidental meetings. Slack your team members to say hi. Try to engage in virtual water cooler talk. Do one-on-ones. Quickly embrace new ways of working. Make sure you're over-communicating anything that you're working on. And really encourage your team to iterate fast and learn as quickly as possible. So secondly, really understand and address the risks. So there's quite a lot of things I've listed here. You'll have the PDF to be able to look through yourself, but this is one of those times where all systems are impacted. So you have to kind of systematically evaluate where risk has arisen and how to address it in your products, in your company. And although these risks are affecting your entire organization, I believe that product managers must take ownership for assessing and making recommendations, certainly in their own areas, but really to influence as leaders, to influence their stakeholders and team members to try to figure out paths forward. Ask yourself how we need to operate differently as a company. And do not underestimate the timeline, how long things are going to take to change, how quickly the impact of COVID is being felt, and how long the crisis could last for. Not so much maybe the actual pandemic itself, but there's going to be secondary effects that are going to take some time to really feel, some shockwaves. So there's a class of risk around financial. Demand has become quite unpredictable. In many cases, customers have stopped buying or can't buy. In other cases, businesses have actually been flooded with additional demand that they're scrambling to react to. Sales pipelines might dry up. Customers might want to wait and see. So you might actually have interested customers that are kind of taking a lot longer to close. You're going to have increased churn potentially. You as a product manager need to look closely at the customers and understand where they stand with your product, their engagement levels, their renewals, and doing anything that you can to understand, model out possible increased churn, and what kind of actions could you take to actually help mitigate that. Secondly, to actually potentially even understand which segments of customers are actually not highly profitable, and even encourage churn where you can't really afford it. And then clearly on a macro level, there's a flight of capital potentially. The lending markets will seize up. Companies might need to take on debt through the storm. But on a micro level, within your own company, individual projects in flight might need reevaluation in light of belt tightening. Take that responsibility head on and see what recommendations you can make about what should be funded and invested in your company right now and what should not be. From an operating perspective, a lot of supply chains have simply broken. Products can't be delivered. That's something that you're going to need to really sort out. Customer support has spiked. That's been made worse by, for example, many companies having customer support in the Philippines or in India, and suddenly those have actually closed down and they're no longer able to support. There's lots of need to reprioritize potential initiatives. There's a time like this to actually generate greater focus, simplicity, reset goals, how to get to fewer things that you're working on, and really think through the longer term portfolio about what's really going to matter and make sure that your team's super focused on that. And then one warning, do not necessarily abandon innovation through risk aversion. Don't immediately advocate for not immediately cutting those longer term projects or those innovation teams that are working on longer term at the expense of trying to optimize for the shorter term. Product managers will need to play a role over the long term, and it will be very bad to lose our most creative people or the projects that are going to give us the most hope in the future. Don't kill your innovation, as that might be the easy target, because you might need them to actually design ways out of this situation. And then finally, on the risks, you've got plenty of organizational risks. Right now, there's a potential loss of focus. Our job, become the voice of clarity. We can't ignore the situation. We need to acknowledge the situation. We need strategies to address this. Let's actually move towards actually addressing the crisis, align our teams, align around our value prop, and make sure that our story is very clear so there's absolute clarity. Recognize there's going to be just increased barriers to collaboration, and there's opportunities for miscommunication, lack of alignment. Generating the best ideas and solutions are going to be harder, and our relationships might not develop as quickly as we would like. How can we actually overcome those? By being extra aware of those and going the extra yards to communicate more and to build those relationships. Related, travel and mobility is clearly going to be more difficult, so employees maybe can't get to work or travel to solve problems with vendors or partners. And there might be a hiring freeze, or potentially even a loss of personnel. So what you were hoping to achieve by attracting new talent and building a team, you may need now to delay or to try to do more with less. So when we think about innovation, about pursuing new opportunities, about efficiencies, greater impact, about entrepreneurship in general, or from within an existing company, entrepreneurship, this idea of industry disruption is sort of something that I've heard connected a lot as a driver of innovation. Industry disruption, changes, shifts in the world. We actually like to encourage it. We think it's pretty awesome, particularly if we're a startup. Real shifts occur in the world all the time. New technology emerge, new discoveries, techniques, new platforms. Consumers and market behavior, adoption, social convention, taste change all the time. Changing economies and scale. What was costly becomes cheaper. What was inefficient becomes efficient. What was inconvenient becomes frictionless. And there's always the regulatory and legal environment that we're working in. But in the early days of COVID, at least in Australia and the US, I heard a lot of people say, well, everything's cancelled, everything stopped. But what's really happening is everything's getting disrupted at once. All of those things is happening all at the same time. This is flipped fortunes. It can't just be about us trying to cut back. It's potentially about actually understanding how all of these things are changing at the same time. We're being disrupted. Everything's being disrupted at once. And we have to think through, how can we actually thrive in these conditions? How can we identify and capture new opportunities and prepare for a new normal? So my third recommendation is really go seeking, where are the opportunities? If disruption can lead to opportunities, even this very big step change, as product managers, I believe that we should ask, how can we understand and identify these, and how can we position ourselves to capture these? So I won't go through each of these in detail, but generally there's the external and the internal opportunities. In the external, how are our customer behavior and technology adoption changing? Have our customers or target customers actually grown into new segments? Have those needs of our customers changed? Are there struggling incumbents, or perhaps there's actually some nimble responders that we can learn from? Have there been systemic failures within our industries that we can actually say, we've got to go fix that so that doesn't happen again? And I recommend that we look back in time and say, when faced with crises before, maybe they were very much like not of a global nature, but of a local nature, or just even our industry. What innovations came out of those? Can we actually identify companies that grew from adversity? And then be ready for those secondary shock waves down the track. Start to think through, how is the market maybe going to respond in 5 months or a year from now? How are behaviors going to change, or regulations going to potentially be put in place? And internally, what initiatives can we pivot today that we're already working on to actually take advantage? How can we move faster, accelerate our discovery and our delivery? Now, with a true sense of urgency, can we really be thinking about how we move faster and rethink the ways that we work and how we make faster decision making? Where is waste? Maybe we've been complacent. Now's the time to really think about, how do we eliminate that waste and be stronger and leaner? Where is the opportunities for greater cross-functional creative collaboration, coming around a common problem and bringing the people together to really tackle some of these opportunities? These are going to be stronger companies, those that can actually do that coming out of it. And then a personal one that I recommend: observe both externally, politically, and in your civil world, as well as your industries. Observe and learn from inspirational leadership at this time. Those that really step forward and are true leaders, learning from them and the kinds of things that they're doing, the skills that they're bringing, will make you a better professional. So, will we go back to the new normal? Will we go back to normal? Well, I kind of challenge this assumption, because one of the effects of COVID-19 is that we've very much turned a lot of opaque in the background things quite transparent. We've really stress tested almost every aspect of our daily lives. Our food supply, healthcare system, education, transportation, government, civil institutions, and even how we work. So once that transparency is kind of there for the billions of us to see, will we not question how we need to do better, how we can not have the same kind of failures we have now, how we can innovate and improve? And even if we could, should we go back to normal? Is business as usual where we want to be? Now, as an obvious place to start is healthcare. We have a new understanding of how our public and private healthcare systems work or don't, and almost no society could actually handle the surge that COVID potentially brought us. Some were able to handle it better than others. What lessons can we learn from them? We will need to shore up our healthcare systems, our pandemic response systems, our scientific research to reduce the chance that this happens again. We will want to start to think about how high growth verticals such as telemedicine and self-care applications actually grow and accelerate now. And this will require new technology solutions that we'll have to bring to market. Incumbents will realize that they need to embrace innovative technologies more openly and improve the way that they manage their hospitals and plan for these sorts of things. And maybe there'll be a question, given the amount that we spend on military versus public health, maybe we've been focusing on the wrong potential enemy. In education, we were already going there digitally, but there was so much more to do. And there's been a scramble worldwide to shift instruction from K-12 to corporate training online. Here in Australia, they closed up schools early before the Easter break to give teachers like 2 days to prepare, learn entirely new technologies, put all their curriculum online. At UC Berkeley, we had next to no notice. We had to bring all of our classes, even the experiential hands-on classes, online, something that we'd never really faced before. These are insanely hard problems to solve at the best of times, let alone under such pressure. Many parents are discovering the joys of homeschooling, and teachers everywhere are mastering new tools. There is going to be, for sure, opportunities in education going forward. In remote and distributed work, companies, I think some companies were already mastering distributed workforces. Clearly, video conferencing's had a boom, and notwithstanding some of their challenges, but that's going mainstream. But more profoundly, we're challenging the way that we work going forward. We've tasted what working in a distributed model looks like. We've shown that we can be trusted, that we can actually be as effective, if not more effective. We're eliminating a lot of business travel. Will business travel return to what it used to be? We are figuring out how to build relationships without necessarily being in person. We're profoundly potentially bringing people from all over the world, where talent is distributed all around the world. And can we actually now break down those geographical barriers to really bring people together to work on problems like we're doing right now? Workers largely hidden in our economy, the supermarket stackers, the agricultural workers. In the US, many of them are undocumented. People who are in high contact roles, caregivers, restaurant workers, perhaps not well paid, suddenly became essential workers, while the best paid, highest profile maybe did not. So what do you do with all these people who aren't in the system or are now much more visible? Maybe we've realized that we're so connected by our biology that we can't just ignore them, that we really have to be thinking about them and how we improve their worlds as well. Thinking about the global supply chain, we've driven the supply chain to the edge of cost efficiency, trying to eke every single element out of it. But now that we've understood maybe how far we've gone and the risks that we've taken on, what will this mean for things like strategic relocation of essential domestic supplies, companies needing to diversify vendors, or even operating in multiple countries? How will we manage that inherent risk in the supply chain better? We've really pushed cost cutting and efficiencies to the edge. And this is not just for physical goods. This is also, for example, the collapse of the outsourced call centers services right at a time when demand really spiked. How will debt impact us? How will consumer demands change? Many companies were already on the ropes. This might now permanently shut them down. Consumers may really pull back from purchases. Businesses, not just businesses, but individuals and families have really been pushed to the limit. So we really need to think through how consumer behavior will change and what will become most important to them and what will they buy from us. And then finally, energy and global warming. Considering where the price of oil went, largely because of market distortions and our feelings of vulnerability that come from all of this disruption, and what happened to the world when millions of cars were suddenly off the road and workplaces went dead. Will we take these global challenges more seriously? We'll notice that how quickly the world kind of adapted and was actually largely okay, we might need to really figure out how we can tackle those. So I'd like to just leave you with a question, and please please enter on Slido your answers. But in the spirit of trying to think about how we can come out of this stronger, what opportunities do you see for your product in the new normal? And I'll leave you finally with this quote. We'll put the Slido question up in a minute. Once the storm is over, you won't remember how you made it through, how you managed to survive. You won't even be sure whether the storm is really over. But one thing is certain, when you come out of the storm, you and your companies won't be the same person you walked in. And that's what the storm is all about. This is from a Japanese fiction writer from Kafka on the Shore, and I think it's very, very pertinent to our current situation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ken, for your presentation and sharing your insights with us. It was really brilliant. Now we have some time for Q&A, and it will not be a lot of time, but we do have some 1 or 2 minutes for that. You might want to do it over Slido. You can snap the QR code or simply join at slido.com and then search for Product over Laminate. And in the meantime, I'm also going to launch our poll so you can answer the poll there. So Ken, I might be able to do a couple of questions, and before we call in our next speaker. Yeah, interestingly, we're having the poll being answered. Okay, let me see if I can have the Slido questions now. So yeah. So still no questions, but if you're keeping up with us, I'm pretty sure people will start pulling on some questions on Slido, and we might be able to do a later Q&A. Is that okay, Ken?
Yes, I'm happy to do that.
Thank you. So I'm just going to end the poll before I'm calling Laila, and yeah, and share the results with you guys. So we have a majority of participants from Europe, but also from Americas and Asia. And what level in your organization are you? Most of our attendees seem to be a team member, management, but some of them, curiously enough, they've answered they work in no-level structures or flat-level structures. And how did you find out about this event? So referrals from speakers, friends, and colleagues was actually the most voted. Good. So, okay, so we're actually going to move on to the next speaker. That is Laila. Laila, are you with us?